Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing editor at CinemaBlend and the co-host of the ReelBlend podcast, here to introduce you guys to another bonus episode of the ReelBlend show. We're pleased to be joined by director Sam Esmail to talk about his new Netflix film, Leave the World Behind, which has an incredible cast. Julia Roberts, Ethan Hawke, Mahershala Ali, Kevin Bacon is in this one. And it looks like going into this movie, the less you know about it, the better. It's a couple who goes or a family that moves out to one of these homes that they rent for the weekend. And then the initial couple who owns the house comes back. And in the midst of them dealing with that confusion, there is a cyber attack that essentially paralyzes our country. And we go from there. Sam worked on Mr. Robot, obviously, is the creative voice behind that. So you can kind of understand where his interests lie. And he's been a guest that we wanted to get onto the show for a little while. Kevin's a huge fan of his. So I was really happy that during the junket for it recently, Jake and Kevin got a chance to sit down with him to talk about his new film. And so without further ado, I'm going to throw it right to Sam Esmail, where he'll be able to talk about his new film, Leave the World Behind, on a bonus episode of the ReelBlend podcast.
First of all, thank you for joining us. It's great to see you again. I'm just going to start off with this because I feel like this movie really is a love letter to physical media. The vinyl sequence when Julia's dancing with Mahershala is beautiful. Obviously, the ending has a physical media aspect to it as well. And I just feel like, for me, I have like 1,700 Blu-rays at home. That's how I watch my movies as well. But making a film with Netflix, obviously, they started off as a DVD company. Right. Now they're obviously very highly into the streaming, but also theatrical. Right. What did it mean for you to put that in there, making a movie for Netflix?
Well, it's strange because, on the one hand, obviously I'm a proponent of physical media, as are you. And I think it's really important. I mean, I think, what was that tweet that Guillermo del Toro...
About Nolan.
Yeah. And no, about how, owning physical media is going to, save our culture, save our movie culture. So I'm a big proponent of that. At the same time, I grew up pre-Netflix, pre-internet. And I read about all these great movies I wanted to see, and I couldn't have access to them, And so that's like the plus side of streaming services like Netflix, is that you really have access to any movie from across history at your fingertips. So there's always a conflict, because I'm a proponent of theatrical. I'm a proponent of DVDs and Blu-rays, but I'm also, I'm not mad at a streaming service that lets me see all the classics, at a moment's notice.
Just a quick follow-up, because I guess by the time people see this, the movie's been out in theaters, but it'll also be on streaming.
Yeah.
The shot of going over the Netflix button.
Going over the Netflix. That was all intentional. If that's going to happen.
Any pushback on that at all?
No.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, no.
Netflix is going, you guys couldn't have gone over any other app. You couldn't have gone over Hulu or Amazon. The word producer means so many different things.
Sure.
It could mean, I threw money at the project. It could mean I'm famous and just want to put my name on it. Or it could mean I'm going to be on set and I want to be actively involved. When your producers are Barack and Michelle Obama, do you have access to just if you have a legit question? Because honestly, when it comes to how to handle this sort of situation, a president would be a great source. Do you have the ability to pick up the phone and say, listen, I do have legit questions to ask you about this movie?
Look, I can't text him in the middle of the night if that's what you're asking, but...
just because he's sleeping.
But here's the thing. He's a huge movie lover.
Huge.
And I didn't quite know how in-depth his movie knowledge was until I started talking to him. And he's a huge fan of the book, and he really was committed to making this into a great movie. And he was giving me notes at the script stage, multiple drafts, including, post, rough cuts. He was really involved. And look, it's kind of a surreal, because I do think he is one of the most brilliant minds on the planet. And to get his insight on this, and it wasn't just, the disaster element stuff, it was the characters, it was theme. It was a highlight of my career.
What was the coolest geek out session you had with him? Not about this movie, but just as two movie fans talking about film.
I mean, I think, there were moments where obviously we just would, talk about our shows, our favorite movies, or et cetera. And just to hear him talk about his love for films and the fact that it's kind of a deep roster. It's not just like the blockbusters that came out this year. I mean,
his lists are always
Did he
pretty
watch Mr. Robot?
He did.
No!
In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. So the way I found out was we were in the middle of second season and it hadn't aired yet, and we were cutting the episodes. And he was president at the time, and someone from the White House contacted our office and said he'd love to get rough cuts of the episodes before
Could
they
you
aired.
imagine, like, in the Oval Office, he's got his feet up on the desk.
He's a huge Rami Malek fan.
It was insane, yeah.
The red phone's ringing, and he goes, "It can wait. I gotta watch one more."
One of the things that we talked about when you came to DC was about your camera work. The camera in this film is very much a leading character. And there's fourth wall breaks. There's movement like Children of Men. We talked all about that. But I really find character placement in the frame to be a fascinating thing you play with here. There's a shot specifically when Mahershala is standing with his daughter and they're talking, and in the frame, they're at the bottom of the frame with a ton of headspace around them. This is after they drive, the family drives away. And then later on in the film, you'll have Julia Roberts in the right of the frame and then Mahershala in the left, and then you'll put her in the middle and then back and forth. The placement of characters and framing, like, can you talk about the narrative choices around that? I thought that Mahershala's shot was so fascinating. There was so much headroom, and it was almost like we were looking at the world, but they were down here.
Exactly. I mean, the way you're just describing it is that was all by design, right? Is that they're starting to feel small in this world that's kind of going chaotic around them, and I think composition can do a lot. I mean, that shot in particular doesn't move at all for the entire scene. It is static, and there's a family getting into a car and driving off, and then there's this father and daughter are having this moment after the other family leaves. So there's a lot of blocking and things going on, but the frame stays static. And I think that just speaks to the power of composition. And for me, it's not just about music and moving the camera and cutting to a close up or anything like that. It could just be as simple as placement that tells you everything you need to know about how these characters are feeling in the moment.
Also, there's an unnerving nature to the way you zoom in this film.
Yeah.
And I think Kubrick used to do that a lot, obviously, and The Shining is probably a great example of that. But there's something unnerving about a slow zoom.
Absolutely.
And you only use it at very particular times and it's almost like a curiosity. I feel like I'm like going like this. I'm like leaning in with it.
Right.
When you do something like that paired with the unnerving music you're dealing with, can you talk about like those comparisons, like what you want to get across?
Well, because you brought up Kubrick, I'll say that I remember when I first saw Clockwork Orange, and if you remember the opening shot, which is, to me, one of my favorite openings of any movie. It's just a slow zoom in on our main character, and he's got like the stare, the Kubrick stare. And I remember when I first saw it, and I was maybe 14, and I was watching it with my friends. We were doing I'd never seen a Kubrick film, so they were, my friend.
That was your first?
Wow. Yeah, Kubrick Film Festival, and we just watched all his movies, or like 6 of his movies overnight. Like we stayed up all night and watched them. And Clockwork Orange, when that shot happened, I remember physically, like you said, leaning in and reacting, and I thought, wow, okay. If a shot can do that, if a shot can physically get you to react to a moment, that was really powerful to me. And if you've ever seen, did you ever see Visions of Light, the documentary about cinematography?
No.
Oh, it's a great documentary. Oh my God, it's amazing. And they talk about this shot in Rosemary's Baby. Then you've obviously seen the film, and there's a shot where the camera is kind of coming around the corner of into a bedroom, and Ruth Gordon's sitting on the bed, and it's kind of coming around, and she's faced away from camera, and she's on the phone, and she's talking discreetly, and you're just. The way they talk about in the documentary, the DP was like, well, shouldn't we come around and see his face? And Polanski was like, no, just let it creep around. And what happened was in the theater, when that shot came up, everybody in the audience just went like this, just leaned over.
Did you do the same shot with the daughter in the kitchen when you go around to her talking to Julie?
Yes, exactly. So
that's what that felt like.
Yeah, so that's the thing. When you can get the audience to physically want to lean in and know more about what's going on, that's, to me, just really powerful.
Because in that moment, you're convincing 300 people that they're not watching a movie.
Exactly.
They're not looking at an image projected
so
on a screen.
Immersed.
They're in the room.
I think Polanski talked about this a little bit.
And Tarantino wrote about
Tarantino wrote about it.
Tarantino
Once
wrote
Upon a
about
Time in
it.
Hollywood, or the book.
Oh, I haven't read the book.
Oh,
Yeah.
does
he talk about that shot?
About the idea of sort of an audience moving with that, which is great. I want to kind of piggyback on that. By no means do I want to take away the significance of shot choices, because you never create a shot just because it looks cool. There's always a reason there.
Yeah.
But I watched this film with my girlfriend and her best friend, and there was probably 2 moments for each of us where we audibly out loud went, "That's a cool fucking shot." And we didn't, we were in the movie, so we didn't sit there and pick apart what it meant. But is there a shot in this film that even you watching, you know what it means, you know what it stands for, you know what it's trying to convey, but you just look at it and go, "That's a cool fucking shot"?
Oh wow! Well, that's a good question. It honestly might be that shot that's just static, and everything's going on in that scene, and the way from beginning to end. It's just
brilliant.
I just love when a shot can be simple, and I don't even know if that shot's distracting because the camera's not doing anything, but you still notice it. I love things like that.
Because I'm looking around the frame.
Exactly.
I'm looking at them, then I'm looking at the world.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
And the fact that we're not doing anything necessarily as filmmakers except locking off a shot and still drawing you in to make you look around the frame. I just think there's something about that. The simplicity of that is I really love.
Can I answer that question for him?
Please.
My favorite shot in the film is I think we're looking at a wall of clocks. And then you have this brilliant dissolve from one of the clocks into the traffic circle. And it matches literally. And I think there's a really famous one in Godfather Part 2 when you go to the mustache.
It goes from the tree to his mustache.
When you're designing a shot like that, and when people see the movie, they'll know what we're talking about. But you clearly set and align that shot with the clock to them. And then when you shoot the overhead of the traffic circle, are you already knowing that the clock has already been dissolved to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, transitions are really important. Huge. And the thing is, one of the kind of key words I used with my team was that this film has to feel like it starts off as a dream and slowly turns into a nightmare. And when you start thinking about it in terms of dream logic or nightmare logic, it's all about tone. And I sometimes forsake plot logic or any of that for that, because I do think that's ultimately the thing that you take away. You don't for me, if the audience member is thinking too much about what's, how did that add up, or you've kind of failed. It really needs to get under their skin. And so when transitions are the best way, because they kind of have this jump in space and time, but there's still a connectivity to everything. And that's how nightmares feel, you don't even know how you got from one place to the other. So we design every transition with that in mind.
That's cool.
Damn.
Yeah. I have a ridiculous question that I hope you don't hate, because I really want to ask Julia Roberts too. So if it crashes and burns here, I'm going to rethink my entire Julia Roberts interview. One of the great sort of subplots in the film is that the daughter is making her way through Friends for the first time.
Yeah.
And her biggest frustration comes from the fact that she's on the last episode, and because there's a blackout, she can't finish the show. Did she at any point, when she got to season 2, episode 12, the episode that co-stars an actress named Julia Roberts, do you think she looked at that episode and went, "She looks just like my mom"?
I always look. I think the film, in the universe of the film, there is a Julia Roberts.
Yep.
And then there's an Amanda Seyfried, which is Rose's mom. In our universe, there is no real Amanda Seyfried. There's Julia Roberts playing Amanda Seyfried. So in that world, I think Rose sees Julia Roberts on TV, who's not her mom, and says, "Oh, there's some resemblance. I don't know." And then she kept going.
Is Amanda sick of hearing it by this point?
Yeah, she's probably
oh my God, yes, everyone tells me.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone tells me I look just like her.
It's like me, I always get stuff for George Clooney.
It's
so annoying.
I'm going to be honest. I thought that's who we were speaking to, and now I'm kind of over this interview.
I mean,
Is this not Boys in the Boat?
Is it not Ticket to Paradise 2? What's going on here? There's a great moment. It's early in the beginning. I think it's one of the Children of Men types of shots where you go to the daughter and she talks about how she's like, "Daddy, can you take me to the Friends set to go to the coffee set?" And he goes, "I think that's not real. It's just it's a set."
Right.
When you were younger, was there ever a movie or a scene you saw that you thought was actually real and you were like, I want to go there.
Can I say I think I thought that about a lot of things. I wanted to go to Hill Valley, you know, Back to the Future. I wanted to go to the New York and Ghostbusters, which is a little different than real New York. But I really I really imagined everything I saw to be real locations, real places. And I kind of still feel that way. I know, obviously, intellectually, I know that these are made up scenarios. But for me, there was just something. There's a childlike thing about it where you just buy into the world. Going back to what you're saying, like you feel like you're in there. So, I probably have countless examples where I always just believed it, and I think to this day still do.
What is the coolest place you've been? The coolest movie location you've been to?
The coolest, you know what I have to say, because I'm such a huge fan of, the Woody Allen movie Manhattan.
Sure.
Oh, God.
And so I just went to the diner. You know that great scene at the end with Meryl Hemingway and, where he leaves her? Or she leaves him, actually. I went to that diner. I just thought. That's
cool. I thought you were just going to say, I've been to Manhattan. I was like, well, me too.
That too.
I did the Katz's Deli thing, but one of my favorite locations I ever did was I sat at the table where De Niro and Pacino sat for Heat. In the diner
where is
scene.
that?
I think it's closed now. It's called Kate Matterini's or something. It was in L.A., but they closed it. But I'm with you on that, and I loved that moment.
Kevin and I glamped together overnight. I'm going to get the name wrong. It's Kahlua Ranch.
Kahlua Ranch, where they shot Jurassic Park.
It's where they shot Jurassic Park and Lost and Godzilla. And so you just walk out, and because they've used that location for so many places, every 30 seconds you are imagining yourself in a different moment in pop culture. And
I remember growing up always wanting to go to the diner in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
And it doesn't exist anymore. There's one in LA that kind of looks like it when I drive. I'm going off La Cienega. Every time I go by it, I'm like, maybe they put it back up.
The Reservoir Dogs diner is still there.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh, really?
Because a friend of ours went there.
We need to get together and make a Jack Rabbit.
We need a Jack Rabbit.
Let's do a Jack Rabbit Slims.
Let's do a podcast at Jack Rabbit Slims. Wait, didn't they actually buy out a place and make a Jack Rabbit Slims? Yeah, I think so.
Well, when I was a kid, I remember, I think I had 4 or 5 different DVDs of Pulp Fiction. They released a special edition with the actual menu.
I've got that.
You can physically.
But what's crazy is with inflation, 25 years later, a $5 milkshake is not bad. I not complain about $5.
Bourbon?
Yeah. That's a little
with or without bourbon.
There's obviously technology is a huge part of this film, and you and I discussed a little bit about the Tesla scene, which I think is a very disturbing, terrifying sequence, just watching those cars crash.
Yeah.
But it made me think about technology scares that people have in their own lives. For example, I'll be in my kitchen, I'll mention cookie dough, and then 5 minutes later, there's an ad for cookie dough. What is your scariest run-in with technology? I know it might not be on the level of Julia Roberts in that scene, but do you have something that scared you like that was something advanced?
I don't, because I'm so paranoid that, and I think my wife gets annoyed about this because I change our passwords every 2 months. I use encryption messaging as opposed to real messaging. I'm just so paranoid that I, knock on wood, have not had anything crazy happen. And I really with that stuff. That's why I kind of avoid social media apps like that, or I'll turn off the mic and I'll do the little webcam. Can you turn off the mic
on your phone?
Yeah, there's software that lets you do that. If you're not,
I just turned off that. What do you call it? Where the two phones can bump and exchange.
I
turned that off.
I need to email you about your tactics.
Well, you know what? There are sites out there that if you want to be private here, and then to give you the 10 things to do, and it's because it's pretty terrifying. I mean, when Apple got hacked with the whole fappening thing that happened years ago. Here's Apple, the $1 trillion company, and if they can't keep you secure, it's we're in a world of pain. So yeah.
I want to talk about a line delivery, and it's in the beginning of the film, so I don't think it's spoiling too much. But Julia Roberts has a line delivery that might be one of my favorites of her entire career.
It's a fourth wall break.
And it's her just saying, "I fucking hate people."
Yeah.
And that feels like such an un-Julia Roberts-like thing to say. Yeah. I'm sort of curious what you remember about that day, and I'd imagine her joy in saying that line.
Oh yeah, she loved it, and we did a lot of takes because it sets up her character, it sets up the movie, so it was a really important moment. But it's funny is I remember when I read the book and started envisioning who this person was. I realized she was really thorny, and she could, in the wrong hands, would be a disaster because nobody would want to be with this person for the next 2 hours.
Was Mahershala call her prickly? That's the line he said.
That's a great line. Yeah, and so I knew I needed someone like Julia Roberts, and it was fun to envision her saying that line because I think coming from her, it's a very different context than from anyone else.
It almost tells us as an art, like, because I think collectively, I said I watched it with two other people, we all went like, oh wow. I think it collectively says, you know that Julia Roberts, that's not who you're getting in this movie, which then when she starts saying some of the other things that she says, when she questions whether or not it's their house, you sort of go like, Julia, what are you doing?
Exactly.
I can't believe you would say these things.
Yeah, and I love when films have that metatextual thing because I do think casting is an art.
Sure.
It's an art form on its own.
There should be an Oscar category.
There really should. I mean,
Bacon in this film.
Yeah. Oh my God, Bacon is so good in there.
What a brilliant moment.
Man. I got lucky with the entire cast, but Kevin Bacon is like one of my heroes.
Of course, he's a Cowboys fan. Of course, he's a Cowboys fan.
What's interesting about Bacon? There's one of my favorite shots in the film where in the car with Mahershala and I think his son at this point, and out the window. Is just Kevin with the gun. And and the whole time he's looming over that moment. And I'm wondering, is he going to pull the gun out and just go crazy?
Yeah. This is the thing about him. I remember when I wrote that character, and obviously he was also in the book, I was worried that character could just veer off too much like a caricature, like a doomsdayer type thing. And then I kind of shared that concern with Kevin, and I said, "What do we do here?" Because I don't think what I have on the page is enough to make this guy three-dimensional. And because he's such an amazing, brilliant actor, we talked about it and we found the way that this guy's humanity is. He wants to protect his family, just like GH and just like Clay. And once we kind of anchored it there, Kevin kind of just fleshed him out to be this real person that you're still scared of, but you understand why he's doing what he's doing.
Because you question, like, would that be? And that's what I love about this movie is that at every aspect of it, you sort of go, listen, I've never been in that situation before. Who's to say I wouldn't be that person? Yeah. If it came down between a stranger coming at my house or me protecting my family, I'm also going to protect my family. And you don't know what lengths you're going to go to.
I love when movies do that. I love when movies can align. You can start to align with whichever character, whoever ends up being the antagonist or protagonist. I remember. And I don't know if I think this was an Ebert review because I would read every single review. But in 7, at the end of 7, I'm going to spoil the ending of 7 for those who haven't seen that. But I just there was something where he said that what's thrilling about the ending of that film is that you are rooting for the protagonist and the antagonist at the same time. Like you want him to kill him, but you don't want him to kill him.
Then he wins.
But then he wins. And so that feeling of just being torn and seeing both sides is to me, it's like what he said. It's thrilling, and I love that. Like in that scene that you were talking about, where Julia's character Amanda is questioning whether we should let GH and Ruth in. A lot of people, I remember after screenings, a lot of people would be like, "Well, I understand. I mean, it's the middle of the night.
Sure.
How do I know?" But then on the other side, a lot of people would sense the sort of racism and microaggressions there. So it's kind of a great place to put an audience where you're just sort of kind of torn and nothing's as like black and white. There's something gray about the whole thing. And I love that. I just think it's more complex and interesting.
I love little character details, like down to like Ethan's shirt, like with bikini kill on it. But with Ruth particularly, the tattoos she has, I believe, are the same tattoos she has in real life. The 96 particularly.
Yeah.
How do you justify a character having the same tattoos as the actor? And like is that how do you build those stories?
Yeah. So I remember Myha'la. So my wife actually directed her in an episode of Modern Love, and
she's so good in this movie.
She's excellent, and she was excellent in Emmy's episode, and then I saw her in Industry, and I remember thinking, this is her. Whoever this is, this energy is what Ruth needs. It has that sort of Gen Z millennial brashness that Myha'la finds like the humanity out of that, where you can kind of understand her point of view. And so when I met her and talked to her about the movie, and I saw her with all her tats, it just made sense that that's Ruth. And sometimes that just is like a happy accident where you just feel like the line between who Myha'la is and maybe the character are blurred, and you can kind of like see the person that you're looking for right there. So I just lucked out.
It's cool.
One of the things I love most about this movie is that for every question we have answered, there are a lot of questions that are presented that we never really get any sort of definitive answer for, which has yielded amazing conversations for everyone who's seen it. I'm sort of curious, when you work with the author, to what degree do you have the right or do you need to have some of those questions answered? Do you get to go to him and say, listen, I know you never didn't put this in the book,
right?
But in order to pull off this script, I need to know X, Y, and Z.
Right. So I'll say this. I remember thinking, and this is tricky with any sort of mystery box type movie, right? Because you know that the audience wants to know all the answers by the time the movie ends. And I knew, and from reading the book and talking to Ramon about it, because and I think he ends the book with a question mark, which I think is telling, because I do think the movie should not pull punches about its ambiguity. And here's the reason why. I think life is full of ambiguity. And I know our intention was to reflect that. So if we had answered every question and tied everything up in a bow, that would have felt very false. And for us, it was just about finding the right way to kind of explore this notion that that it's the not knowing, it's the uncertainty, it's the life. It's life that scares us the most, and it's finding a way to channel that.
That's cool.
There's a really interesting theme in this film about we as a society don't know how to be bored anymore. We just don't know how to be bored because everything we do, like, I think there's even a line, like, we were really bored back then.
Yeah.
And it really is an interesting thing because when we're bored, the first thing we do is either pick up our phone or we have something to do that's going to give us a dopamine reaction or whatever. But back then, you had to actually sit in your thoughts and be bored. And I'm just wondering, as a filmmaker, as you tell stories like this, and we think about the fact of how far we've come with technology, but how it's limiting our creativity and our mindsets, I just found it to be a fascinating thing. I was just curious what that meant to you to include that, and kind of the idea of, like, what are you trying to say about that as a filmmaker?
I think ultimately, technology, it's sort of a double-edged sword. I think it's, and I never view technology as good or bad. I think it's a tool like anything else. I think it's what we do with it,
it's
right?
Like CGI.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I think about how the positives, it gives us access to information, to people, to media, to content that we want to explore. Like we were talking about earlier, I can see any classic I want, basically, at a moment's notice. That's all great. But then what is it going to do with our reality, right? Because that is still not reality. I mean, that is cyberspace. That is like in the ether. And what are the consequences or the residual effects with the people that we have to live with and grow up with and love and hate, and like all of those things sort of get abandoned and put by the wayside. And I do think that's ultimately kind of like the big dramatic question for society right now. It's part of the reason why Rose's arc is about how she does feel shut down with her family, but she feels closer to these fictional characters on the show. And I think that's kind of happening more and more. And it may not be a TV show, it may be influencers or TikTokers or whatever, but people are developing more what they think are more meaningful relationships in this sort of false reality. And
we almost care more about other people's reactions than our own family and closest friends, which is so...
The comment section on the internet. How often have our days been ruined because of a random stranger who has an avatar for a profile picture saying that we were stupid about something?
But then my mom will text me and say, Kevin, that was a great interview, and the only thing I can think about is that negative comment that a person I've never met before. That's so freaking
It's wild.
weird.
It's wild. And what does it say about us that we care about? And that's I think that's the thing that we're going to have to kind of deal with and face.
They're about to give us the wrap, so we'll cut you loose on this. I feel like, you have such a great history of telling a story over multiple seasons and episodes. And these days, a lot of books are getting sort of the mini-series treatment to sort of be able to flesh out. Was there ever a point where you, as you were trying to crack this book and you were starting to craft the script, where you thought, if I had 6 episodes to do this, I could do X, Y, and Z?
For me, I'm, having done television, the art form of TV is in the episodes. Like, I really believe that. I've heard filmmakers and showrunners say, well, it's like a 7-hour movie that we just cut up. I think if you look at TV that way, I think you're going to kind of fail, because TV really is about the art form of each episode, and that each episode sort of has its own point of view, its own tone. And when I read this book and thought about what the movie was, it felt consistent to me. If I had done that, I think I would, just to add time, I think I would have been betraying what's best about the TV model.
It didn't feel rushed, and I kind of did a quick run through of the book, and I didn't really feel like obviously there were some changes because daughter versus wife, but overall I didn't feel like you lost anything.
No, I mean the book was so great in terms of these characters and how well drawn they were, and the sort of, again, this fear of the unknown. I wanted to mine all of that.
Sure. I'll end on this because we have 1 minute left. I want to get this thing because I think the music in this film is brilliant. Like you have needle drops that play perfectly, but they also weirdly work with the score.
Yeah,
the score is
yeah.
score is very, very, very hot, almost a character in the film, I would argue. But you open the movie with the Joey Badass song essentially, and then you have songs that play throughout. But then this score is extremely eerie, and I'm just wondering when you're working with the composer and you also have needle drops at the same time of actual soundtrack, because some films are either soundtrack heavy or score heavy, right? I just wonder like what that relationship is like to your score and your soundtrack.
Well, so when I start writing, I start developing a playlist, right? Because I like to write with music in mind. And I share all of that with Mac, my composer, like as I'm writing. And then once I finish the script, I do something very differently with the score, because I used to do this where I think most filmmakers tend to temp, right? They do a cut of the movie, they use temp score or temp music, and then they show that to the composer. Whereas I think with Mac, because we've worked for so long, I just said start writing music based off the script, and because he knew my playlist and I had some instrumental music in there, he started to get a vibe and the sense of what I'm looking for. And he started giving me music as I was shooting. And like that shot that you were talking about where it goes from the clock to the. So I had that piece of music. He didn't obviously score it for that shot because I was literally shooting it that day. And I just played it on set while we were doing the shot. And I was like,
the overhead shot?
The overhead shot. And I was like, that's the cue. And so I told Mac that. So it's almost like this kind of symbiotic thing that's happening where he's feeding off my script and my playlist, and then his music is feeding off how I'm shooting it.
It's kind of like movie making is very much like a living, breathing
absolutely,
thing.
Yeah. You always just kind of want everything to kind of happen in unison, almost as if it was live and spontaneous,
Thank you so much for joining our
you.
show.
So you are the perfect guest for our show. You have no idea. This was a great conversation. So seriously, thank you.
This was great.
We want to thank our friends at Netflix and, of course, Sam himself for coming on the show. I want to thank Jake and Kevin for handling that one. As you can tell, junkets are back, and so our schedules are filling up, and we're doing some travel to head out to press events. And we're going to be able to review Leave the World Behind on the main show, because even though it's been in a few select theaters, it's going to be coming to Netflix the day that you're listening to the main show. And speaking of the main show, part of the reason why Sam has become a bonus episode is because the day that we are recording, or the day that the bonus episode is airing, we are going to be recording a potential, if it happens, that could be really big. And if it does come together on Wednesday, then that will be part of the main show on Friday. So cross your fingers, stay tuned, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, do all the cool things you're supposed to do here so that you stay up to date with all the new ReelBlend content. And we're going to finish the year out strong with some really exciting interviews. We'll review Leave the World Behind on Friday and hopefully have a really exciting interview for you guys to enjoy on the main show as well. Until then, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for tuning into ReelBlend. We appreciate all your support and sharing of this show to movie fans like you guys around the world.